Grab them anymore. That was my trick for now. Oh. That's awful. Who was she?
Tape up everything.
Welcome to all of you. Welcome back to the gym. Welcome to the folks at home. For anyone who isn't aware, my name is Stacy Wells. I'm the Dean of Mission and Ministry here at Cathedral Catholic, the best job on campus, especially on days like today. We welcome everyone, and we're here today to hear stories that we may be unfamiliar with, but that will hopefully break open our hearts and help us to learn more about what building God's kingdom is really like. Our school prayer is, let my gifts change the world, help us live the call, and build the kingdom through the joy and the love of the Holy Spirit. And so today we hope that this talk will move us that much closer to really understanding who we are and what we're called to do. So today we have Mr. Hurt is going to do our official introduction.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm thrilled to introduce to you today Jose, Joshua, and Father Greg. My students, colleagues, friends, family, basically anyone I talk to knows that I'm a fan of Homeboy Industries, Dolores Mission Parish, and what Father Greg stands for. I was first introduced to Father Boyle and Homeboy Industries during college. I was taking Professor Stephen Pope's service learning course, and we read great people like Dorothy Day, MLK, Cesar Chavez, and Thomas Merton. But toward the end of the semester, we kind of complained to Professor Pope, saying, these people we're reading, they're great, but who's doing anything today? It seems like no one is doing anything close to what the people we're reading about are doing. Professor Pope told us, he said, I wouldn't be too sure about that. Pay attention to what's happening in LA. There's a priest there doing good things with former gang members. He told us about Father Greg and recommended a book called Father Greg and the Homeboys. I read it and I was hooked. I realized that what captivated me then and still captivates me today is that Homeboy Industries and Father Greg are putting into action some of those abstract concepts that we talk about in our mission and ministry courses here. Concepts like compassion, inclusion, and the love of God. To put it another way, Father Greg is showing that these concepts are not just answers for a test, but things that we can live out in our daily lives. And now I'd like you to join me in giving a warm cathedral welcome to Jose, Joshua, and Father Greg Boyle. And we will first hear from Jose.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. So, I guess I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. Some of this stuff I probably never talked about. So, when I was 9 years old, me and my 3 sisters were taken away from my mom because she had a alcohol and drug problem, you know. And maybe when I was younger than that, I didn't know she had it, but she had it all along. And that caused me to go live with my aunt and stuff like that. Eventually, I ended up finding my way to the streets because, I don't know, I think I was running away from whatever problems I had at home, you know. And eventually, I started going in and out of juvenile hall when I was 12 years old. And I was still struggling because my mom still couldn't get it together, you know. And so I had to force myself to grow up, you know, at that age. And I had to figure out how to get everything for myself, provide for myself, for my sisters, because being that my aunt was just taking care of them, they used to get the bare minimum. So I used to have to give them everything that they deserved to have in my eyes. you know, and yeah, that caused me to get in trouble. Eventually, I ended up going to prison not too long ago. Long ago. In 2012, they were trying to give me 20 years. I brought it down to 6 years. And I spent 10 years in prison. I just barely recently paroled in March of this year. And I've been back at Homeboys ever since. I'm working at the Art Academy. I work with the youth. We teach them graphic arts. We have healing circles. Anything that comes down to art, we have it there. And it's great. It's helping me with my change, you know. I got out like 5 days before my birthday this time. In 29 years, I've never had a birthday celebration, you know. I don't know why. That's just the way it's been, you know. And even when I paroled this time, I didn't even do nothing for my birthday, but I was thinking about it like recently, like damn, I never celebrated my birthday, you know, but I think that's why other people's birthdays are like big to me, around me, you know. But me, myself, when it comes up, I'm just like, it's just like another day, you know, but I don't know, that's just the way I am when it comes to stuff like that, you know. Probably because when I was little, I never celebrated it, or they never celebrated it for me as a custom, but it's good, you know, like, right now where I'm at, I'm glad where I'm at. I made a lot of changes in my life, you know. I'm getting tattoo removal. As you can see, I have tattoos all over. In 2016, when I seen Father Greg again in prison, he was scolding me in front of everybody. I was like, Pops, relax, man, you're embarrassing me in front of everybody, you know, like, don't yell at me, you know. Everybody's looking at me like, is that for talking to you like that, you know? But I'm like, relax, you know? But if it wasn't for Homeboys, today, I think I'd be where I was at before, you know? In the streets, running amok. I would have probably been back in prison right now, you know? But gladly, I got my foot down this time, you know, and I know where I want to go. And for sure, it's not prison again, you know. I'm content with working 8-hour shifts, you know, going home. Me and my girlfriend have a little baby now. That's not ours, it was her sister's, which passed away last year from dialysis. But she keeps me strong, you know, because she calls me babe, so, you know, it means more from when my girlfriend calls me babe, you know? But, yeah, I just want to say thank you, you know, and for having me and Josh and Father Greg. I appreciate you guys' time. I don't know if I lost you in the story, but I'm not really used to getting up here and talking in front of a lot of people, so I am shy. This is probably the longest I've talked in a long time, so, and believe me, it is. And, yeah, thank you.
So guys, good morning. Happy birthday, dear Jose. Happy birthday to you. Hey guys, good morning. My name is Joshua. I currently work at Homeboys. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Let me start in the beginning. When I was 9 months old, me, my mom, what I thought was my dad, but turned out to not be, my stepdad, my sister, and my little brother, we came here to LA, but from 9 months up to, we were homeless for like 4 years. So it was pretty hard when I first came to LA, you know. From the ages of 12, which is middle school, I ended up getting locked up in Silmore for a bad choice that I made, you know. And ever since I got locked up as a kid, you know, from there on, you know, I was like, yeah, nah, like, you know, this isn't for me, you know. My childhood was pretty rough. My stepdad, every day, you know, he'll blame me for everything that will go wrong in the house. He'll beat me. He would also, you know, do things behind my mom's back, unfortunately. My mom also, she just recently passed away not so long ago due to gang violence. Unfortunately, she got shot and she died in the scene, you know. And to be honest, I think that was that's one of my hardest experiences in my life, you know. I have a little brother and a little sister, so like that hurts me even more, you know. Not being able to tell them that, you know, mom's gonna be okay, you know, she's gonna come home soon, you know. They already know what happened, you know, they know she passed away, but it still kind of hurts me to see them, because not so long ago we had my sister's 15, and it was the hardest part, you know. My sister just broke down crying, unfortunately, because my mom wasn't there. And I joined the Homeboys exactly exactly a month after my mom's passing. But before I joined, I fell into drugs. I fell back into what I used to do back then before my mom even passed away. I started doing cocaine again, but I've been 2 months sober from that, which I'm really proud of myself, you know. I came a long way. Sober is the best thing ever, you know. I'm able to, you know, be the person who I was before I even ended up doing drugs, you know. My experience at Homeboys has been the best, you know, like, it's been the best. Just, I've been on my stuff lately, you know. Been doing my work, been going to work, showing up. My navigator, Jose right there. He's always on my ass, annoying, but, you know, I love this one no matter what, you know. He's like a big brother to me, you know. Father Greg, the first time I walked into Homeboys, he received me with open hands, which I really appreciate, you know. And Father Greg, for me, would always be a father, no matter what, because I see him as a father figure for me. He asked me a question when I walked in the first time to Homeboys. He was like, what do you want to do for yourself? You know? At that time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but, you know, I gave him my answer that, you know, was kind of valid. I told him, you know, I want to fix myself, but I'm going through it right now, you know? And he was like, well, if we get you a Homeboys, you know, like, would you be able to, you know, would you be willing to change your life, not for others, but for yourself? And I was like, of course, you know. And that's when Father Greg, you know, he gave me the job at Homeboys, you know, and I appreciate him for that. And yeah, that was my story. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much for welcoming the three of us here. It's good to be with you. Thank you, Joshua, for your courage, the tenderness of your courage. And thank you for singing happy birthday to Jose. You know, his nickname, his gang Blaca, is silent, so he doesn't speak very often, so thank you for doing that. You know, Cathedral is a little bit like what Martin Luther King said about church, that cathedral's not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to create something unimaginable. You want the world to look differently than it currently looks. Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we go from this place to stand at the margins? Because that's the only way they'll ever get erased, is if you go from here and stand out at them. and you stand with your, using your imagination. You imagine a circle of compassion, and then you imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And you go from this place to dismantle the barriers that exclude. And you stand in a particular way with a particular stance with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. You stand with those whose dignity has been denied. You stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And what a privilege it is to go from this place and stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. You get to go from here to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and to stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And I suspect if the creation of a community of kinship happened to be your goal, you would no longer be promoting justice, you'd be celebrating it. No kinship, no peace. No kinship, no justice. No kinship, no equality. No matter how singularly focused you may well be on those worthy goals, they actually can't happen unless there's some undergirding sense that we belong to each other. Well, I think none of that makes very much sense at all, were it not for the fact that the God we have is huge, spacious, and expansive. Unfortunately, sometimes we settle for a partial God. We don't hold out for the God we actually have, the one who wants you to go from this place to be in the world who God is, compassionate, loving, and kind. I remember I was saying Mass at San Fernando Juvenile Hall, where Joshua was locked up, and I was saying Mass in a gym like this, and there were like 500 gang members in folding chairs in front of me, and I had my alb on and my stole, and the homies would come up and do the readings, and so I had the sheet. Everybody had the sheet that had the readings in English and Spanish translated. And I thought, well, I'm not going to read along. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to listen to the homies get up and do the readings. And the first guy got up and did the reading. The second guy got up to do the responsorial psalm. And there's a kind of an overabundance of confidence in his voice. And he gets up and he says, "The Lord is exhausted." And I said, what the hell? And it was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. Because the exalted God is the one that we've projected onto God. If I was God, I would like to be exalted. But the exhausted God is more like the God we actually have. The God who loves us without measure and without regret. The God who's extensive towards us. And all of us have experienced that joy of exhaustion when you are other-centered, when you love being loving, which is your true self. And so we're invited to go from this place to create a community of kinship such that this exhausted God might recognize it. So for almost 40 years, the homies have taught me everything of value, and I'm deeply indebted to them. But, you know, I'm ever more aware of how they have taught me how to text, and I'm really grateful to them, because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty good at it, LOL and OMG and BTW, and the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh hell no. And I've been using that one constantly, even this morning. And the homies are always hitting me up for money. You know, they always like, I can't pay my bill, and like, I don't know, they're gonna evict, and they're gonna whatever. And I you know, and I remember, you know, the autocorrect is the thing that kind of keeps vexing me. There was a homegirl named Bertha who texted me on a Sunday. She said, "Where are you at?" And I said, well, I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas, and those of you who are taking Spanish know that monjas is sisters, nuns, religious women. I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas, and I pushed send, and autocorrect told her that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas, which she thought was pretty darn interesting. And just this morning, the homies are endlessly texting me to pay this bill or that bill. And the homie he just needed $100 to finish off his rent, and I didn't have it. So I texted back simply, things are tight. And I pushed send, and autocorrect told him, thongs are tight. And he wrote back and said, sorry to hear that. What about my rent? So anyway, I told you all that to tell you this. I was driving with two homies early in the morning after our morning meeting, Manuel and Poncho, and they're older vatos who do a variety of things at home. Boy, they're going to help me speak at a high school just like these two guys. And so Manuel's in the front seat, Poncho's in the back. And we're 15 minutes on the road when Manuel gets an incoming text, and he reads it to himself and he chuckles. And I said, well, what is it? Oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office. I just saw Snoopy. I just gave him a big abrazo as the day was beginning. Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want it. And I said, well, what's the text saying? He goes, oh, it's dumb. Hang on. Here it is. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now. Show them they got the wrong guy. Well, I nearly drove into oncoming traffic, and then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them? Cathedral is not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from, so you can bridge the distance that continues to separate us. So Homeboy was started a long time ago when I was pastor. From 86 to 92, I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of LA, Dolores Mission. It's nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, huge. The largest public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other, which is unheard of. LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city, in the whole gang capital of the world. So I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988. A month ago, I buried my 256th young person. Not all from that parish, but I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school because there were so many middle school age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the projects. They were getting high, they were writing on walls, they were violent. So I would walk out to them and I would kind of isolate them one at a time, and I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, every single one said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so it kind of forced my hand. And right across the street from the church is our parochial school, grades K to 8, occupied the first 2 floors of this huge concrete building. The entire 3rd floor was the convent where the ninjas lived, and so I gathered the nuns together one night. I sat them down in their living room and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out, and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members? And they looked at each other and they said, sure. And then we were off and running. It was a tough school. We had fights many times a day, every single day. And it created a disconnect in the parish. Parishioners would come up to me and say, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? Good people in and bad people out, which was a good gospel challenge. And then the gang members said if only we had jobs, and so myself and the women in the parish was mainly women with children, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that didn't work out so well, so we started stuff. Maintenance crew, landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of rival enemy gang members from the 8 gangs. Then in 1992, the entire city of Los Angeles erupted after the acquittal of the 4 police officers who beat down Rodney King. Every pocket of poverty ignited, except the poorest pocket in the city, my parish. So the LA Times wanted to know why this was, and so they came and asked me, and I said, well, maybe it's because we had 60 strategically hired gang members who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before. And more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch their own community. So a movie producer read this article, a man named Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million, and he summoned me to his Beverly Hills office, and he said, how should I spend my money? And I said, well, you could buy this abandoned bakery. It has ovens, they don't work, but you could fix them. We could put hairnets on rival gang members. They could bake bread. We could call it Homeboy Bakery, and that was the extent of my business plan. And now nobody intends to do such a thing, but now we've backed our way into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. So 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors. We want to create a safe place where gang members can be seen and then cherished, and then have the bravery to transform their pain so they don't have to transmit it anymore. The Buddhists say, "O nobly born, remember who you really are." And at Homeboy, we're allergic to holding the bar up and asking folks to measure up. Instead, we hold the mirror up and tell people the truth, that you're exactly what God had in mind when God made you, and then you watch folks become that truth, inhabit that truth, and no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. At Homeboy, we know you have to reach in, you have to dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that keep people from seeing their truth. In the Acts of the Apostles, it says, "And awe came upon everyone." And it suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So many years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia, and it's what we call in the biz a gang in-service. So these social workers commandeer a hotel ballroom, and from 9 to 5, they have workshops and breakout sessions and keynote speakers, and they get credits. And I'd done a lot of these before, so I said yes, figuring I'd give a keynote or something, and I bought my ticket to Richmond, Virginia. A week before I was to fly, I pulled the letter out, and I'm looking at it, and to my horror, I discover that I am to be the only speaker from 9 to 5 all damn day. And I said, oh, hell no, I'm not going to be the only speaker. So I brought in 2 trainees like these 2 guys, Andre, African-American gang member, and Jose. They were enemies from rival gangs. I sit them down in my office, and I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. take your time, because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories before, and Jose gets up first. And he's like 25 years old. Gang member, shot caller, been to prison, tattooed. In his 9th month, they were both in their 9th month of their 18 months with us, he had become a very valued member of our substance use disorder team, a man solid in his own recovery and now helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction issues. So not only had he been to prison and was a gang member, he also had a long stretch as a homeless man, even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasped. And he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish, he said to them, and they went from gasp to laugh. And then he continued, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walks me up to an orphanage, and she knocks on the door, and the guy comes to the door, and she says, I found this kid, and she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, because the blood would seep through. Second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the 3rd t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion. And he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if we don't welcome our own wounds, we may well be tempted to despise the wounded And Cathedral's not the place you've come to. It was always going to be the place you go from to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. Inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. Let me end with this story. You know, it occurs sometimes, probably not here, but some schools where they will force students to read my books against their will. I'm not complaining. But Gonzaga University, which is my alma mater in Spokane, they forced their incoming freshmen to read Tattoos on the Heart, and they said, could you, come and speak? And it was going to be a big thing on Tuesday night, 1,000 people. And they said, could you bring 2 homies with you? And I do when people invite them. And I always pick homies the same way. I always pick enemies so that they'll force them to share a hotel room just to mess with them. And I always pick homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panicked in the sky. And so this one time I picked these 2 homies, enemies, Larry, African-American gang member, and Mario. And I'm used to homies who are paniqueados, who are very terrified of flying. Oh my God, this guy Mario just was something else. He was kind of freaking me out a little bit, because he was like hyperventilating. I'd never witnessed this before, we hadn't even, boarded the plane yet. But so we flew from Burbank, if you ever know what that airport is. It's a smallish airport, big planes, Southwest Airlines. But you don't walk through that hermetically sealed chute to board the plane. You have to walk out onto the tarmac like you're the president. And they have the stairs that go to the front of the plane, steps that go to the back of the plane. And I'm sitting with Mario, and he's just panicked central. Larry is walking somewhere in the airport, and it's early morning. It's the first flight of the day, and I see our flight crew arrives, and there are 2 flight attendants, females. 2 of them have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the stairs to board the plane. And Mario goes, when are we going to board the plane? I said, well, as soon as they sober up the pilots, there they go now. And perhaps I shouldn't have said this. So I should tell you that in 35-year history of Homeboy, Mario is the most tattooed individual who has ever worked there. He's all sleeved out. His neck is blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered with tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that, I don't know, when he's lying in his coffin, there will be no doubt for anybody, I guess. And so I think, well, I'm going to walk him through the airport. Maybe this will calm him down. I'd never been in public before with him. And people are like this, and mothers are clutching their kids. I go, wow. Because if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow, walk up to anybody, tell me if I'm right or wrong, and you say, quick, who's the kindest, most gentle soul who works here? People would wait a beat, and then they'd say Mario. Yeah, Mario. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. So we get to Gonzaga, and there's the Tuesday night talk, of course, but what they don't tell you is they have 94 other talks planned for you in 94 classrooms. So I tell Mario and Larry, I said, I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. You guys get up, just like these 2 did, and tell your stories. And they did a good job, though Mario was terrified. They were stories of torture and terror and abuse and violence. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. So the nighttime talk comes, 1,000 people. I coaxed them up as I did these 2 guys. And Mario was particularly terrified. But they did a good job. And then I got up and did my thing. And then I invited them up to stand next to me so we could do a Q&A. And so I was, yes, ma'am. And a woman stands, she goes, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate. And Mario's a tall, skinny drink of water, and he comes up, he clutches the microphone. Yes. He's terrified. And the woman says, well, Mario, you say you're a father, you have a son and a daughter who are about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? What advice do you give them? Mario closes his eyes. He clutches the microphone. He's starting to tremble. He's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say. When suddenly he blurts out, as soon as he says those two words, he rushes back to his microphone clutching, closed-eyed refuge. And now I know he's losing the battle with his tears. But he wants to get the entire sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving. You are kind. You are gentle. You are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping. And all Mario can do is hold his face in his hand, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself. And they in turn had been returned to themselves. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. And I think that's the only praise our exhausted God has any interest in. Cathedral is not the place you've come to. It was always going to be the place you go from. And you go from here to create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. You go from here to imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. You go from here to dismantle the barriers that exclude. You go from here to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. And you go from here to stand at the margins, because that's the only way they'll get erased. And you brace yourself there, because the world just might accuse you of wasting your time there. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." Go from here and make those voices heard. Thank you very much.
Now we have lunch. Seniors, you are dismissed.